Well, hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome to the All Portable Discussion Zone. It's a bi-weekly live stream on Sundays, all about amateur radio portable ops. My name is Charlie, call sign is November Juliet 7 Victor, and with me this evening are the show's two co-hosts. We've got Dan, KC7 MSU, and we have Brian, W7JET. And I am pleased to introduce to you tonight's guest, George, KJ6VU, from, I guess it's San Jose, California, right, George?
Yeah, that's right, San Jose. Hi, Charlie. Hi, Brian, Dan.
And of course, as always, we have our regular characters in the chat room. I see we've got K8MRD, we got Mike there, and we've got Gaston, the tech prepper, and many others that we see that come along on a regular basis. We welcome you as well. And we welcome you if you're going to be joining us after the live stream and catch this up a little later. Of course, if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the chat, and we'll be sure to throw them up there and get them answered and respond to them. So let's go ahead and go around and see what's been going on with everybody over the last couple of weeks. Let's start with Dan this time. Go ahead, Dan.
Uh-oh. Well, let's see here. I was preparing to go do a particular hill on the 30th. So that's actually my birthday. So that was going to be my birthday gift for myself. But unfortunately, Coconino closed all the roads and because it's winter time now. So now I got to find a new hill. And so I'm kind of on that quest. And let's see what else. Spent quite a bit of time last week looking for a new heat pump for the house. Mine went out and trying to find one that you can actually get before New Year's or slightly after New Year's was pretty tough. So, but
supply chain
I think,
issues, right?
Yep, supply and demand issues and everything else. But looks like we got one that'll come on Tuesday, which will make the family very happy.
Oh, good. Well, so for just to clarify a little bit more to the listeners, Coconino National Forest closed all of the forest roads, and so there's no access to get to some of the peaks that we normally like to do. And now over the last couple of years, there's also now an ordinance in the county that you can't park along paved roads to allow the snowplows to get through. So it's going to be really tough to get in there. But the best kept secret is Kaibab National Forest, and so look at that, right? All right, Brian, what's been going on with you?
I think activation. That's probably the best way to describe what's been going on. Lots and lots of activations. So
for Summits on the Air.
Yes, for Summits on the Air. And also, nope, not entirely Summits on the Air. I've also been going POTA a little bit too as well. I had a couple of solo POTA activations in Arizona and Nevada when I'm in that part of town. Been on a few mountaintops recently, quite a few actually. I even dragged Charlie on a few the other day. In fact, we had a little race. Charlie just started driving from Scottsdale at about, what was it, about 4:30 in the morning, Charlie? 4:30, 5:30 in the morning? All right, he left at 5. I got up at 5, left my house at about 5:15, and then, started my my leisurely trip from Scottsdale up to Flagstaff. We talked a little bit on the radio on Simplex. I think I passed you doing about 250-ish miles an hour. I think you were in Camp Verde around that time. I think I went right over the top of you. Got to Flagstaff, made some breakfast, changed, got my bag together. Charlie finally showed up about 7:30, picked me up, and then we went and hit some hills. Did 3, as a matter of fact. Originally the plan was for 2, but because Charlie is so efficient, we were able to actually add a third one in. Got the third one done, and then had some lunch. Went back to the airport. Actually, we picked up lunch. Went back to the airport, and then Charlie started driving home. I left about 45 minutes later. Took my time. Again, passed him, probably doing about 230, 250 miles an hour. And I was actually eating Red Robin about the time that Charlie got back into town with my wife. So, yeah, it was a good day on what was it, Friday, Charlie? Right? It was Friday. I'm sorry. It was such a whirlwind of a day. I actually forgot. But the best part about that whole day is Charlie did all the driving. I just had to sit there and keep an eye on him.
Yeah. Now, if you want to see part of this activation, there's a video coming out tomorrow night. Which shows I capture a little bit of our conversation with him up in the airplane and me driving, as well as some of the one of the 3 peaks that we did. So check that out. Maybe tomorrow afternoon, I think it is around 5-ish, I think. So anyway, all right. So Brian pretty much described what I was up to. One other thing I'd mention for that trip is that Brian named my hiking stick that I have, that I put my my GoPro on. And so, if you don't know, when I film my my activations when I do POTA and SOTA, I record them, and I have just a GoPro that's kind of attached with a bike mount to my my trekking pole, and I'll sit there and I'll talk to it just like this. So Brian named the pole Wilson. So yeah, just from from so because I'm always just talking to, looks like something like nobody out in the middle, all alone, right?
Yep, Wilson.
Pretty funny. All right, George. Well, we're up. Okay, so again, welcome to the show, and I'm excited to talk to you quite a little bit about getting some portable stations going here. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But what have you been up to for the last 2 weeks?
Gosh, for the last 2 weeks, it's usually building something. I'm. You guys are very active operators, right? So,
yeah.
So my operating pales in comparison to all of you. So I'm what apparently I'm what is called a propagation ham, and a propagation ham is someone that builds a radio, and you make a contact to prove that it works, and then you put it on the shelf and go build something else. So
Okay.
actually, I don't do a whole lot of operating. I tend to do more like stuff on the bench. But when I do operate, actually, I really like portable operating, whether it's a, lightweight SOTA kind of thing or any kind of field. I love field day. That sort of stuff's a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, field day is awesome. Cool. All right. Well, let's. I don't know that everybody knows you, and I mean, I would. They've been living under a rock, probably. They might not, but just to kind of make sure we get our bases covered. Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself, just a couple minutes about that, and then maybe talk a little bit about the ham radio workbench, and then we'll hop into our topic.
Oh, sure. So so let's see. I kind of going back to the beginning. I got my license when I was in middle school, so that's a long time ago, back in the 70s. So I got my novice license and got on the air as a novice, which was only CW, of course, at the time. It's either CW or you weren't on the air, so you kind of had to learn it. And then I kind of crawled up through the different license classes over the years, and I've always really liked building stuff. That's really always been my big interest. So so I built a lot of kits and I designed a lot of stuff. And some of the things that I designed turned into a little side business. Nothing that you could live off of, but something that would at least pay its own way. And designing things like repeater control systems, which are kind of big and complicated, or some portable stuff like antennas. And so I like doing that a whole lot. I like encouraging other people to design and build stuff too. And like I said, I don't really operate a whole lot. Mostly, if I'm on HF, it's mostly CW. I'm not a great CW operator. I love CW, but it's hard for me. But it's my favorite mode. So and I'll work sideband if there's a contest on, like a sweepstakes. I might do a handful of contacts just to prove it could be done and that the Coax is still functional.
Yeah.
But my favorite operating is really portable. My favorite event of the year is field day. So I love setting up field day and operating and hanging out with my ham radio friends. So I love that. That's really, I wish we could do field day like more often. Although I guess you can. They call it POTA, right?
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. I was
SOTA.
just gonna say that that's how I got involved in ham radio was through field day, and I love field day. We the 3 of us do field day every year, and just really look forward to it. So we're with you on that. And I would just mention too that we need people like you, because when we're out active all this time, we got to have people that are running the tests and figuring stuff out for us.
Yeah. Well, it's whatever motivates you. I like designing stuff and building it, and then if other people want to actually use the thing, it's very rewarding, because, it's like, well, that wasn't just a nutty idea you had. Someone else thought it was useful too. And so it's very rewarding when someone's willing to actually use the thing that you came up with. So, which is kind of like the genesis of doing the podcast, by the way. So we've been doing the Ham Radio Workbench podcast for about 5 years now. And that's all about, encouraging people to get hands-on with ham radio. So not just buy a box and use it, but figure out, how do those things work, and maybe build a kit, or maybe even design your own thing, and melt some solder and build things. And so that's that whole dimension of the hobby is interesting to us, and we really wanted to get other people thinking that it's not that hard, and it's like anything else. You put some time into it, you learn stuff, and it just builds. So that's been our real big focus on the podcast.
Well, I just say that you're to blame for the hundreds of dollars I've spent, a lot of money I spent on going back to school in the electronics program at Mesa Community College to figure out some of these diodes and op amps and all this stuff. I have a bunch of kits behind me that still need to be built, but I have your show is one of them that inspired me to get out there and build a little bit more and to put some stuff on the workbench and get some of that solder smoke in my nose, so to speak.
That's awesome. I'm really happy to hear that. Well, that's the goal.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, Brian and Dan, anything you want to mention before we get into the topic?
I don't have anything currently.
Yeah, I'm just listening. I know you're working on the Palomar controllers. I'm a intertie guy as well.
Okay. There's so many. It's hard to keep track of everybody. I didn't realize that. That's good to know. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I know TWW really well, and TUJ and the whole crowd here in Arizona. Dougie, IXA.
Oh yeah. Well, they all use our controllers. Well, actually, the predecessor to that. There's a whole rat hole discussion about repeater controllers we could have for a couple of hours. But I was very lucky because when I was a teenager, I met some other hams who were very into repeaters and big time, like seriously into it and building repeater systems. And so I aspired to learn what those guys knew and to be like them, and hung around with some really smart people and, tried to absorb as much of that as I could. And I am pretty fortunate because some years ago, a good friend of mine, John, I twisted his arm and convinced him that he and I should design a repeater control system that essentially became the standard for the intertie. So that was and still is a really fun project. It's very complicated. It's one of those things where you go, man, if I knew how hard this was, I probably wouldn't have done it. But once you kind of get through some of the hard spots, it's not so bad. But yeah, that's a great project.
Yeah, the intertie is a good group. I kind of have was fortunate enough here just from talking to actually TWW on DMR one day. He invited me to the lunch they get together with on Thursdays, and I don't know if you're ever in town. And anyway, it's the same kind of thing. You sit there at the table, and I just listen to the conversations and absorb all the information. And then periodically, when I need help with something, I can grab one of them and I get an explanation. Sometimes that far exceeds my ability to understand it, but it's a good group of people. I call it the big brain group. Yeah.
For those who don't know what we're talking about, there's an organization called the Cactus Intertie, and it's a network of linked repeaters that started in the 70s, in the early 70s, and currently there's over 200 repeater sites throughout the whole Southwest that are connected together, and they're all linked together with RF. They are not linked together with voice over IP. There's nothing wrong with that, but they're all linked together with either UHF or microwave RF paths. So you can talk anywhere from the Bay Area, where I am, all the way down to the Mexican border, and then out east into Texas, and the edge of Texas, in Corpus Christi. So it covers about 7 or 8 states directly with RF link paths. So it's an amazing system. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty cool. All the stuff they're able to do with it, and Robin being the guru as well.
Yeah. When I first joined the club, I had to go through an interview at Robin's house, and it was like a job interview. So you had to eat the raw liver and answer the questions correctly, otherwise you didn't get in. And so somehow he took pity on me, and I squeaked in. And actually his partner in the original intertie design is a fellow named Alan Bergstaller, who passed away a few years back. And Alan was the genius that designed their original repeater control system. And I was, as a teenager, in Alan's garage etching circuit boards to build one of his control systems.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it was an amazing learning experience. And the thing that he came up with, the way the control system works, is still used today. So anyway, it's different hardware.
Yeah, obviously.
But the mode of operation is the design, essentially, of the architecture is the same. It's incredible.
I went to lunch with them for a couple months before finally said, "Are you a member?" No. You want to be one? Sure.
Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get going then into the topic of discussion tonight. Cactus intertie is very interesting, by the way, and I feel like I've been wanting to join for a while, but it's a hefty upfront, isn't it?
Well, you mean like cost-wise, or
yeah?
Well, there's annual dues. There's a lot of hardware to maintain.
There is,
putting it mildly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it's not worth it, but I'm just saying it's it's hefty. But
when I tell people about it, I say it's not the average repeater site with not the average repeater controller. It's significantly more expensive than what most clubs are running. So yeah, there's a reason why it's not a simple membership.
Actually,
if you
can see the frame where is it? Way back here. This little everything. That's one of the repeater control systems. It just happens to be sitting here in the office, but yeah, it's a whole card cage full of stuff. So it's pretty crazy.
Cool. All right, so let's get into building out your portable ham radio station. And I thought we want you to come on, George, because I think it's going to be a good mix. Because like I mentioned before, we're really active in getting out in the field and using gear. And you've got a great mind as far as the conceptual. Plus, you always do get out in the field too as well. And so I think we all have experience and have great ideas. I think that we can bring to the table on building out a really good antenna portable system. But to start with, it really depends, doesn't it, on what you're planning on doing. What do you guys think, Brian, Dan, and George? What do you think maybe the different categories of portable op are as far as what radio you might consider? What do you think?
I think a big decision is do you want to run QRO or QRP, or do you want to do both even?
Yeah. So what radio? Go ahead, Brian.
I was going to say the same thing along the lines of power and what you're planning on doing as far as the portable op. Are you always driving up and setting up on a picnic table, or are you planning on carrying it for a little while?
Yeah, that's a big one of the big decision points in the choosing a radio. Then is how much power you take along. For me, for example, I have with me an 817 almost all the time. And the reason I have an 817, it's a Yaesu FT817, is because I like doing sideband, and I also like some of the other bands and modes. But when I go backpacking with my wife or with other people, I always take the MTR3B and that doesn't allow me to have sideband, and it's just a 3-bander. All I can do is Morse code as far as a mode goes, but the size and the weight is significantly reduced. And so this is a great example of one choice that you would make as far as whether you go with like an MTR3B, a CW only rig, or if you go with something like an FT817. And then if you're doing parks on the air, then QRO, you've got a different choice there again.
Well, in every one of those choices, it's not just how big and heavy is the radio, but that also dictates how big and heavy is your power system going to be, and even other accessories like antenna tuners, and if you use one. So there's kind of a break point. You're either going really light or you're going not really light. So right. I tend to think about them in one of two categories. You're either like trail backpack lightweight, or you're in the trunk of the car, not so light, and then you can gear out appropriately for each of those scenarios, and they're really pretty different.
Yeah, and I think Dan started out with the QRO radio doing some on the air, right?
Yeah, I started out with the 857 and used to carry along a tuner along with it and everything else, plus batteries and things. So and then finally started getting a little more intelligent about my weight, and ended up buying a KX3, which definitely made a big difference weight wise. And the difference between being able to do QRO and just doing QRP, even single sideband with that particular rig, really didn't change my contact count. So I'm really happy with that decision.
Yeah. What made you decide to go from one to the other, you think?
Primarily weight, and then the front end on the 857. Every once in a while I'd encounter, issues with being able to hear and stuff like that, just, on top of a mountain with a bunch of other communications gear. And the KX3 is just not bothered by it at all. So I'm really happy with that.
Cool. And then Brian, what do you use now?
So primarily now I use a UKITS HB1B. And I primarily run CW, and it's a whopping 4 watts into a link dipole that has been serving me for quite a long time now, and it works well. I started out with an 817, various batteries until I found what worked, and then those were the 14 volt or 15 volt lithium ion batteries, and then went to the LifePo batteries from Bioenno, but swapped over to the HB1B. In fact, in one of the pictures in the opening credits, you see me holding an HT looking up at the top of an antenna with my hat on, and that was actually the first activation I used the HB1B on, which was like number 40 or 50 or something for me, and it's been the primary radio ever since. And the main reason is weight, and it works. If it's a really high RF environment, like during a contest weekend, it overloads pretty quick, but 99% of the time, unless somebody's transmitting right next to me, the radio works. Is it fantastic? No, but it more than gets the job done for me, at least. And I could surprisingly plot some fairly weak contacts with it.
Yeah, cool. So what do you think, George? What would somebody? I mean, let's hear what you have as far as what you would think if you had to, go out in the field today and do summits on the air. What would you choose, and why?
I've had a whole bunch of different radios, and I buy and sell probably half of them and keep half of them. And the ones I tend to accumulate are just ones that I really like because they're kind of specialized. And so I've stuck with my Elecraft radios. I built most of their kits, and then I got the KX2, KX3, and those are probably the best radios. 705 is an awesome radio for different reasons, and I quite like that one. But the latest one is this guy, which is a Discovery, Lab 599 Discovery TX500. And I kind of didn't jump on the bandwagon right away with the radio. I thought I wasn't sure about the layout, frankly, but I bit the bullet and bought one, and I love it. I think it's great. And the thing that I really quite like about it is it doesn't have the all the frills that the 705 has, for sure. But I also find when I'm using a radio like this, I really don't use those frills. I just need a radio. I don't really need a lot of extra features. And the thing I really like about this one is I don't feel like I have to baby it. Every other radio, I feel like, I got to put it in its hermetically sealed case for fear that it would be exposed to the atmosphere. But this thing, I can like drive a nail with this thing. So and then I picked up a couple of 3D printed covers that cover the knobs and the display with a little bit of Velcro. And I don't bother putting this into a case. I just toss this in a backpack.
Yeah.
So that's greatly reduced the bulk. And you could operate this out in the rain. It wouldn't bother it a bit. So I love that. Because all these radios work fine,
Yeah, you're gonna talk about this, right? In your upcoming show, an upcoming show, aren't you?
Yeah, we did we just did an episode that was mostly going to be around about gear bags and non-radio stuff. So we spent 2.5, 3 hours talking about nylon gear bags, and part of that show was going to be to get into talking about the 599. So we had Thomas Witherspoon, K4SWL on the show. And he's got this radio as well. And by the time we got to talking about the radio, we were at like 3 hours on the episodes. We thought, okay, we're gonna cut it here. And so Thomas kind of gave us his summary comments about the radio, and then we're gonna have him back on in February, and we're gonna do a deep dive on the 599.
Cool. Looking forward to that. I really like what you said about all the bells and whistles. I think for me, I'm not really looking for a lot of bells and whistles because I'm wanting to get up on a mountain, deploy, get my contacts and then get down. I don't need a waterfall. I don't need, a lot of different things. I mean, a filter's nice, but other than a filter and making sure that I can get some contacts and getting that 5-way those airwaves out, there's not a lot that I really need. So and that, I guess that's when you're. I guess consider when you're building a station, that's, I guess you got to determine whether or not you want light or you want to get out there and then do QRO. In that case, you can't go light, really, can you?
I've seen this, a certain behavior happen a lot. And that is when you first get into something like that, there's a million accessories and you bulk up. It's like if you've never been backpacking in your life and you go on your first backpacking trip, you got like a 60-pound bag of stuff, If you've been backpacking 5 times, you've got 25 pounds of stuff. You figured out you don't need half that junk. And because you didn't use it, you didn't need it, you didn't want it, and it certainly isn't worth the weight. Exact same thing happens with portable radios, in my experience anyway, which is like, oh, I need a battery, I need a bigger battery, I need a solar panel, I need a waterfall display, I need a laptop or a tablet or a phone to do digital, I need, on and on it goes. And now you've got this very complete station, which makes perfect sense at home. But when you're out on the hilltop, what do you need? I mean, you basically need the radio, the wire, and like a paddle.
Exactly.
Like you don't need all that other. And quite frankly, at least this is my own personal observation. By the time I get to that point where I'm ready to operate, I'm going to operate for like an hour. I don't really have a lot of time to
that's so true.
Futz around with all the features and all. It's like make some contacts, have some fun. And what you really want is it to be reliable.
Yep.
And the fewer things you have to break, the more likely you're going to be successful. And so I went through this cycle of like, I need more stuff and I need extra stuff and more, because what if I want to operate WinLink on the mountaintop? I mean, you kind of go through this mania of adding stuff. And then by the time you actually go to use it, you go, man, I never used most of that. And then you just don't bother taking it anymore. And you also hone your skills better, because now what you really wind up with is like, wouldn't it be better to be better at CW? Wouldn't it be better to be able to hear a little bit better on sideband? Or, whatever the skill happens to be is much more valuable than that other thing that you have to carry.
Yeah. So I think I've heard. So for those of you, Dan, did you have a question? You're muted if you do, or maybe a comment.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that the thing I'm learning more about is, simplicity and reliability is the most important thing, right? I mean, if half your accessories that you haul up the mountain don't work, or they don't operate the way you expect them to, and they're frustrating, why carry all that extra weight?
Yeah. And by the way, you can't tell anybody this when they start, because when you start, it's like, oh, I have to have the auto tuner. I need the solar panel. Well,
Guilty.
After you do it a few times, then you kind of go, actually, I'm kind of over that. And, so, but it's hard to resist it, because we're all gadget freaks to begin with. Right. So we're doing this hobby partly because there's stuff, right. It's like another thing to play with. But yeah, reliability is really the most important thing.
I was going to say with George, that's the thing I struggle with right now, because every time I think, I really want to get the KX2, because it'd be nice to have the microphone, the size, the small, and everything else. And then I go out and I have an activation where I rent out 60 contacts on a radio that I bought used for $220.
Yeah.
5 years ago now, and it's got thousands of activations on it. And I'm like, nah, I don't need to. It still works just fine, and I'm getting just as much pleasure out of operating on this as I would on something else.
Yeah. Well, there's another plus to that too, by the way, is a lesser expensive radio, as long as it does what you need it to do.
Yeah.
If something terrible happened to it, you wouldn't be crying over it.
Oh no.
So it's like I take a handy talkie when I go hiking, and I could take, my $500 Yaesu FT5, or I could take my $140 Yaesu FT70. I'm not taking a B brand radio, but yeah. I'll take the FT70 every day because it's a third the price. And if it falls off the cliff, but if the FT5 fell off the cliff or got scratched, more likely, right, I'd be really bummed out. So, those radios stay home, but like the FT70, that's the one in the pack, because that,
Yeah.
less
Even
expensive.
if something that's single band, especially, you know, it's more prevalent for CW operators, but even a single band radio, you know, is a whole lot better than, you know, multiple radios, multiple accessories, you know, to take out on the mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Let's say the UKITS radio, part of the reason why it became the primary radio was when I had my old job, it would travel with me for a week at a time at work in my suitcase. And it might not get used the whole week, but it took up a very small amount of space. And if I happened to, when I went to Mexico or some of the other foreign countries, if somebody going through customs decided that they wanted that radio, I didn't have to worry about, I wasn't going to be as upset if it was my 817 that the guy was acquiring. Nor, you know, if it got dropped or whatever, but it bounced around in my suitcase for a long time, and it's, for what it is, a very durable little radio.
Yeah. Shane says, how much time I have available for the activation plays a role in what I bring. And that's so true. I've done an activation where I took a 20-meter QCX Mini and a little paddle and you know, link dipole, and you know, it fit in a little bag about like that, and had a great time, made plenty of contacts. You can do that. And that's really inexpensive to do it that way. And plus, you made the Q6 Mini yourself. You got the kit involved, and I made the antenna too. So you can really, you know, you can really do that, or you can go ahead and you can take the KX2 and you can take several antennas, and it really all depends. Like Shane says, all about how much time you have on the hill and what you want to accomplish, right?
The amazing thing to me is that the whether you spend $1,000 or $200 or whatever in between, or more than 1,000, I guess you get 705, right? All of the radios are all perfectly usable and very good performers. You could probably measure a difference, but they're not. It's not something you could practically observe. So, you know, when I first started playing with portable stuff way back when, QRP radios were awful. They were just terrible. Like, you know, at the old days, you'd get something like a Heathkit HW7, HW8. Those are horrible radios. There's just I'm sorry if you love that radio and you're listening to this. I'm sure you love it, but it's, by any measure, they're not that great. Today, like, get a QCX, $50. A QCX is a great radio. I mean, it's better than any radio made 30 years ago. You know, for portable use. I mean, it's just, there's no comparison.
Yeah, I'm amazed at the front end on that thing. It just sounds fantastic.
One of the things I was going to throw out there too, though, and this is just an observation as we're talking, one of the themes that we're talking about with simplicity, weight, size, and a whole bunch of other things, one of the key things that we're talking about is CW, right? Because most of these radios we're talking about are CW only. So if you do want to go that ultra light, ultra portable, the reality is you're going to have to learn code, because ultimately that's the most efficient in weight and bang for the buck and overall performance on air is CW. So I guess, George, what would be a comparable competitor for people that have no interest in CW, want to do phone or something along those lines? What would you suggest for that?
I think the main thing to look for is the output power, because you can get along fine with 5 watts on CW, but 5 watts on sideband it could be pretty painful. And it's not black and white. Obviously, it's a sliding scale. But in my experience, 10 watts or more is really necessary for sideband. I mean, if you have all day, you can wait out the propagation. Maybe that's fine. But if you're doing a SOTA thing and, you've got like an hour, whatever, you have a finite amount of time and you really want to make end contacts, 10 watts is going to make a difference. 20 watts even more. So I would say it depends on your budget. So at the 10 watt radio level, 705, Lab 599, there's a ton of radios out there. 817 is a great radio, but it just doesn't put out enough juice, in my opinion. Just not enough. The Zygu G90 is a great radio. It's 20 watts built-in tuner. It's a great price. So I think that's a real winner in my mind. I used a G90 for a couple of years. Perfectly fine radio. There's the new 6100. I don't have an opinion on that at all, but I think it's like 10 watts in the same kind of $600 price category. So the thing I would really look for, number one, is 10 watts or more, and then what's your price? How much could you spend on it?
Yeah, KX3 works really well too because it's a little higher output. So
yeah, KX2 and KX3s are both fine because KX2 with the built-in battery will run 10 watts. KX3 with an external battery will run up to 15. So that's very respectable and probably the best receiver. Like you're saying, Brian, it's like Dan, I forget one of you guys mentioned that, like, that has a great receiver. It's a fabulous receiver.
Yeah. All right, guys. Stuart says, I just use the same antenna and radio every time. So he uses the same antenna and radio every time, a mountain topper and a Pactenna.
Yay, Stuart.
So that brings us to antennas. I might as well transition right into antennas now. I think, is there any final comments about the about radio choice before we move into antennas? I'm hearing none. Okay. We're going to bring somebody in here, and that is the tech prepper.
Hey there, guys.
Yay.
Don't have a beard, so you may not recognize me. There was a beard malfunction. Barber in California took too much off the sides and left me with an oversized goatee. So starting over 6 days in.
Yeah.
Wow.
Bummer.
All right. Well, we wanted to bring you on because we do have several people, quite a few people actually, in the chat who have used George's Pactenna, different kinds, but you've also used at least 2 different kinds that I know of, if not more, and have a running relationship with him. So let's turn it over to George first to just talk a little bit about Pactenna and what that is, and then we'll get into the antenna choices. So take it away, George.
Hey, Gaston, good to see you. Nice to see you live. Besides on your video, so it's nice to actually chat with you.
Ditto.
So Pactenna is, we jokingly call it an artisanal antenna company. It's like artisanal olive oil or something else. So we make little portable HF antennas mostly, and some VHF stuff. And it all started just because I wanted a good portable antenna. I think I've probably bought every popular portable antenna from any big vendor over the last several years. And I found that they were always either too big and heavy, or they were too mechanically shortened so that they could be more portable, but they were not very efficient. And so that was really kind of the motivation for coming up with a better design. And so I just wanted something that was really lightweight, I can throw in a backpack and go. The thing that really jump-started the process was I found a source of fiberglass masts. So at that time, well, even today, most of the masts that you find portable fiberglass or carbon fiber masts tend to be fairly short. They're like 16 to 20 feet or so. And I found a source of these fiberglass masts where they were 10 meters tall. They're 32.5 feet. And all of a sudden, my mind is like, wow, man, you could do a lot with that. Why is that a magical thing? Because it's a quarter wave on 40. And so when I operate portable, I'm always either on 20 or 40. And it's easy to get a 20-meter antenna up in the air, but it's hard to get a 40-meter antenna up in the air. And so a 32.5-foot fiberglass mast was phenomenal, because now I could do a 40-meter quarter wave ground plane, or use it as an inverted V or like whatever. So then the next step was like, okay, well, what kind of antenna? And so it was pretty obvious that wire was the way to go. And so the whole idea behind the Pactenna notion to begin with was to make to optimize for a few different dimensions. Number one, to have an antenna that's as efficient as possible, because if you're operating 5 or 10 watts, every little bit counts. And so if you have a loaded antenna, they're less efficient. And so you want a full size antenna. So if you want a full size antenna on 40 meters, it's 33 feet long. You can't, that's only one side of it. So the only practical answer is wire. Plus the fiberglass mast was an enabler. The second big criteria was to make the antennas as mechanically as small as possible, so that I, as a backpacker, wouldn't mind tossing it in the pack and not notice it, either in weight or in size. So it had to be as small as practical without going nuts, right? It has to be usable, and it has to be robust. So it has to be built out of materials that are both lightweight but also very solid, just like backpacking gear. If you look at real trail backpacking gear, the stuff is made, the best stuff is made to be very lightweight and very durable. And the it comes at a cost. You don't get something for nothing. It winds up being more expensive, but that's kind of the way it goes. So you can have, cost, or you can have performance or weight or whatever. You can't have them all. So something's got to give. So that was really the criteria. So how do I make an efficient multi-band HF antenna that's robust? And I had like a couple other minor criteria. It had to be something I could set up in 5 minutes or less. I didn't want something that was a science project when I showed up at wherever I'm going. So once I stopped and I'm setting up the antenna, if it's not up in 5 minutes, I'm not using it, and it's got to come down in less than 5 minutes. So that was equally important. And so those thoughts actually were not only for the antenna stuff that we've made, but the feed line and any other accessories. It's always with all those things in mind. So I always look at this and think, okay, is that something that I would put in a backpack and carry? Is it worth the weight? Is it worth the size? Is it worth the setup effort or not? And so it kind of went from there.
Okay. So then you have, well, generally speaking then, so you just talked about Pactenna. I think that you pretty much respond with the Pactenna to all of the antennas that I would take out in the field, because and you guys speak up here too, Brian, Dan, and Gaston. As far as I'm concerned, my number one or two, you can debate back and forth which is which, is either the linked dipole or trap dipole, maybe with a little more loss, or the end-fed half wave. And those two, to me, are the most efficient and can get you out the best. You might have also, if you have a tuner, you might do the random wire, right? And I think you have each of those, right, in your lineup?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Yeah. So, and then also you have what I wanted to get Gaston on here for. And Gaston, go ahead and talk about what we were on Elephant Mountain doing.
Yeah, sounds good. So George sent me maybe 6 months ago, maybe longer, this little guy. It's called the Pactenna Trek Mount. And you use it with the pointy end of your trekking pole. And it's got a couple of B and C connectors. And what's cool about this is you connect your feed line, and you have two options to run this guy, either in a vertical configuration for FM on HF or VHF and UHF, or what's really fun is as a dipole. So you have basically two antennas coming off of each end. And I actually use it for single sideband work on 440 and 2 meters. And I found these two guys. These are the Comet BNC 24. And it is a really flexible wire antenna. And it basically will coil up on itself and fit in the palm of your hand. And I have been hooked on single sideband and 2 meters now for as long as I've had that. And I've been able to make contacts with the 818, 817 going out 120 miles on 5 watts. And it is my go-to if I want to activate a summit on 440 or 2 meters. So it's ultra lightweight, especially with the 817, very capable. So I've really enjoyed that. And now I'm experimenting with Yagis and a few other antennas, which are kind of bulky to bring up. But the Pactenna Trek Mount is a go-to for me. So congratulations on that build, George.
Yeah, thanks, Gus. And I really appreciate all the feedback too, because sometimes when you come up with these ideas, if you show it to someone else, they kind of go, "Why in the world did you do that?" You kind of second guess yourself, but the feedback was really very encouraging. And I love 2 meter sideband. To me, 2 meter sideband is one of the funnest modes. And a lot of us have radios like the 817, and you don't use sideband very much. And so doing sideband on the hilltop is fun. I love doing sideband on field day, even though it's really mostly an HF contest, not a contest, mostly an HF event. But I always like doing 2 meter in 432 sideband. And that's one of the reasons I want to do that little mount there with the horizontal polarization, so that we can do sideband on contest weekends and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so the Trek mount thing, by the way, the original trekking pole I used was a Z-Pack carbon fiber trekking pole. And the way a lot of the trekking poles are manufactured, at the pointy end, there's usually a basket that either bayonets on or screws on. And so the reason the hole is the size it is because you can slip it over the pointy end to the stop and then screw on the small basket, and it holds it rigid. And that actually fits a lot of different, not every trekking pole, but that was the original model to make it work.
That's really cool. Gaston has let me use one of the prototypes. I guess you sent him a couple, and so I am really excited about getting out there and doing some 2-meter sideband and CW, 2-meter CW, and I have the same setup as Gaston because he's proven that it works. Tell him about how far you're able to get with 2-meter sideband.
So we have the Arizona SWAT net on 2 meters, the Sidewinders on 2, and there's chapters all over the country. And there's a gentleman out in Tucson, Arizona, Doug K7EME, and he runs a Sunday morning net, I think at 8 a.m. local time. And he quite literally is 120 miles point to point as the crow flies. So I basically just have to trek up about 1,000 feet in the backyard and S9 signal reports all day long. I've switched away from the trek mount to get to other stations with the directional antenna. So George, would be great if you come up with some kind of mounted directional Yagi that's still man packable would be cool. But yeah, the ability on 5 watts to go over 100 miles has been impressive.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do a Yagi for a while, and in fact, I noticed Stuart in the chat there. Stuart and I were talking about coming up with a Yagi kind of design. He's done some Yagi designs himself. If I could ever figure out one that kind of hits the criteria of ultralight and still pretty durable, easy to set up. Anyway, so there's a few ideas around that, but I haven't quite settled in on what I'm super happy with yet. But now the other thing to think about with a Yagi versus just the dipole, if you go from vertical to horizontal polarization, there's about a 20 dB difference. And so just getting on the same polarization gives you the majority of the advantage. If you go from a dipole to, let's say, a 3-element Yagi, the difference is going to be about 5 dB. I mean, roughly. So from getting on the right polarization is your big hit. Getting a little bit of additional gain, another 5 dB is not bad. So, I mean, if you have an 817, 5 dB, let's say 6 dB, an 817 that's like, now you get a 10-watt radio effectively plus. So that does make a difference. The question really is it worth the extra weight? And the difference between those little tiny whips that you were showing Gaston and now a boom plus additional whips or elements, then it just gets a lot bigger and a bit heavier. So I just haven't settled in on like the perfect design idea yet. So still hunting for that.
Well, let me plant the seed with you. So not to give a shameless plug, I will. The MCOM Tools project I've been working on has an offline FCC call database feature that knows your GPS location, and it will give you the bearing of the remote operator. So if you do have a directional antenna in the field without cell or internet access, you can actually orient it directly in their bearing, assuming they're at their physical location that they have on file with the FCC. So I think that'll also improve the signal strength on on 5 watts when you're operating QRP.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. All right, let me just throw this back up here. It's a ham tuber invasion. Do you know what? We've got Smokey, we've got Ham Radio 2.0, we have Kyle, we have Chuck. We have the whole night. Everybody's here tonight, so I appreciate you guys coming. I would just like to transition from Pactenna to just the regular group discussion about what you use for HF and why. And so let's start over here with Dan and talk about, just give everybody kind of an idea what HF antenna you use and why.
I'm using the link dipole, and I like that just because it's incredibly simple. It's easy, if something happens in the field, I can repair it and make it work, and it's very light. So I can run multiple bands and all day long, and it just works.
And did you make yours, or is it a purchase?
Mine is a purchase.
Okay. Soda beams?
Soda beams, yep.
Yep. Okay. Brian?
So I'm using a linked dipole. It's actually been in service. I was just looking since 2014. That's when I made it, and it's worked very well for me. It's gone through a couple different changes. It had 12 meters in it when the 12 meter challenge was going on with Soda. When 12 meters dropped off because frankly the sunspots weren't there, removed 12 meters, and it just set up for 20, 30, and 40, which are 3 of the 4 bands on the UKITS radio. And I like it because it's been very reliable. As Dan said, it's easy to repair in the field. If one of the ends pulls off, I can just twist the wires together and it works just fine. And I've done that a few times. It didn't. I think I have maybe $15 or $20 tied up in the whole thing, and it weighs less than a pound, so it's small. It folds up real small. I feed it with 173. And it fits inside of, it's inside of the bag, and it's been to 4 countries and, well over 300 summits at this point. So it's definitely proven its abilities to activate. And that's the reason why I use it. It's been reliable and it's worked well for me.
Cool. And then of course I mentioned I use the link dipole. I have used an end-fed half wave that that Malin sent me, and also I have another one that I've used before. So those are also pretty good. And then Gaston, what do you use?
Well, I use the Pactenna Mini end-fed half wave on 20 meters. Been using it for about a year and a half, and I have the RG316 feed line, and then I just use the Sodabeam's Carbon 6 17-inch mast, and it's been working pretty well for all my contacts.
Cool. All right. And then George, what are your thoughts on all this?
Well, I use all the above. Just depends on where I am and what I want to do. If I'm lazy, I'll use the random wire with a radio with a tuner. But probably for 40 and 20, I'm using what Gaston was just showing there. I'm using the end-fed half wave and a carbon fiber mast. I've got a bunch of 10-meter carbon fiber masts that are heading towards California as we speak. So I've been experimenting with that. The downside of the carbon fiber mast is you can't just run a wire up next to it like you can with the fiberglass mast.
Sure.
So fiberglass mast is better for sure.
I've had experience with that.
So if you treat the mast like it's metal, then you'll be fine. Just bear that in mind. But with that in mind, I've been using a 10-meter carbon fiber mast and the end-fed half wave sloper, and then the end-fed half wave is cut for 20 meters. And then I finish off the end with another strain relief loop, carabiner, and a banana jack. And then I have another element for 40 meters and another element for even 80 meters. And so I could do a whole 80-meter half wave that's a lot of wire. But it packs down to nothing. It's just a lot to manage. So really 20 and 40 with that 10-meter carbon fiber mast is I think that's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah. So that's kind of it, though. Really, when you're talking about QRP, especially, your options really, I think, if you want to be effective, are limited to the end-fed half wave, the link dipole, and the a tuner for the random wire. Anything vertical, I mean, you can get contacts, but efficiency is kind of interesting.
Well, I would use those antennas in a vertical, not the link dipole, but the end-fed half wave or the end-fed random wire in a vertical configuration. So like if you go to a park and you don't have room to stretch out horizontally, you've got a small footprint. I just have I always bring a mast. So I would just use the mast and run the wire up the mast. In that case, the fiberglass mast works fabulous. And then either use the Coax as your counterpoise, or if you want to stretch out radials, you could, if you have space for it. But that keeps your footprint really small. So if you're in a parking lot, that's really a great answer.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move away from antennas, and we have just a few minutes left. We might probably go over a little bit, but I think it's okay because we moved up an hour, so we're not going to be stepping on anybody's toes. If you can hang around just a little longer, George?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Let's just open it up. We won't talk about some accessories generally speaking, but let's. Is there anything else to discuss about the antennas? And from anybody in the group, you wanted to add?
Coax.
Brian? Coax. What about Coax?
Yeah. I just want to second what Gaston said on Coax, and that is to use what he's waving around there, RG316. So if you're going to do a deployment at a fixed location and size is not an issue, I wouldn't use it. I would use RG8X or something big and beefy. But for backpack portable kind of operation, 316 is the perfect coax because it's very small, it's very lightweight, and it's you're only talking about 10-20 feet of coax, so it's not like the attenuation at 40 meters is going to matter. So it's perfectly acceptable. It's terrible for long runs at UHF. Don't do that.
Yes.
But for HF, it's fine. And for 2 meters, it's fine because you have a 10-foot piece of cable. Even at 2 meters, you're going to see half a dB of loss or whatever. It's nothing.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, do you know what the loss difference is between that and like a 316?
316 versus.
Versus what do we use, Brian? 246 or something like that.
173.
173.
174 probably.
Or 74, excuse me. Yeah,
174 and RG316 are mechanically the same geometry, and they're exactly the same electrically. They have exactly the same loss characteristics. The difference is that 316 is PTFE. It's Teflon, as opposed to so if you take RG174 and put it in the sun for a couple hours, it gets very soft and pliable and malleable. The 316 doesn't. The 316 is a much more resilient cable. It's a little stiffer, but that doesn't really matter a whole lot. But it's electrically the same as 174.
Okay, cool. Any other comments, Dan, Brian, Gaston, on antennas before we move on, or anything else that we haven't covered so far?
I think the other thing I was going to say about the antennas, and really when it comes to anything, especially with soda and even with POTA to a certain extent, try and use stuff that doesn't have a lot of parts, because parts get lost, parts roll underneath cars, parts fall into the gravel and look like every other piece of gravel. And I've had that experience early on before I got to using the link dipole, because frankly, like we've talked about, it's simple, it works. Before that, I was using some of the other branded antenna systems that have lots of pieces, and the success and the frustration were not, the lines were going in opposite directions with those antennas. So they're good for certain applications, but portable applications, go simple. Simple works really well.
Yeah, or you leave the most critical part of that particular antenna system or any part of your system at home for some reason, because you were looking at a bunch of stuff of it, and you get there and you can't repair it because that piece is unique and it makes the whole system run. So
I had thrown one more thought. If you do have a setup that has bits and pieces like wing nuts or connector, bring an extra one. Just if there's a thing that comes apart, you are going to drop it and lose it. So bring an extra thing just in case.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of touched on masts. Let's probably need to talk about masts for just a minute, and then it's just accessories, which hopefully it doesn't take too long. But let's spend just a few minutes on masts. We mentioned the carbon fiber masts and the fiberglass masts. So what do y'all use? I mean, I have it's called a Black Widow. It's actually, I think, 2.5 feet, not collapsed. Brian just asked me on the last trip, when are you going to get rid of that dang thing? But I like the rigidity of it. I like that it's very rigid, and it goes up 17 feet to 20 feet or something like that. And so I don't, it doesn't bother me that much. I have two other fishing poles in the closet that are smaller, but they're less rigid, and they can't hold the antenna. If I have like a heavy coax, I'm going QRO, I can't really use them. But anyway, what do you guys use? Let's start at Dan, then Brian, then Gaston, and then we'll go over to George.
Well, rolling around in the back seat of the truck are always 3 masts. So I've still got the fishing pole, and I've used that once in a while. But I've also got the soda beams. The HDS 7000. I carried that around for several years, and now what primarily goes up the hill mostly is the carbon one, just because of its size, and it goes up the same height for the most part anyways, and the weight savings is just wonderful.
So for me, I use the 16-foot or somewhere in that range collapsible fishing pole that can be found on eBay for usually $20 or less. It usually will show up about 2 or 3 weeks from China when you order it, and then I soda-ize it, which involves putting a couple layers of heat shrink, bright yellow. Ask me why it's bright yellow now and not black, over the bottom, so that way it's very easily found again when you drop it on the ground of black sticks. And the end of it where they usually have the little loop, I'll take that last section out, and then I fashion a hook out of coat hanger wire, and I'll epoxy it in the end, and then I'll build up the end with some more heat shrink. And I usually get a lot of time out of one of those poles. I think the last one lasted about 3 years before the wind finally took it out on an activation, but it was starting to get dry and you could hear it creaking when I was putting it out. So that's what I've been using consistently, and it's been a good performer for me for what I use it for. I've got a couple different sizes now. I've actually just made a larger one that I use for the POTA only, or the activations where I'm not having to haul it, but everything else, I think the stick is about 18 inches, Charlie, I think, when it's collapsed. You saw it the other day. It's about it's low enough where it's not above my head. So when I'm doing the off trail hikes up the hill, it's not getting caught in every tree that I'm going
meets
under.
the rule of thumb that it's just barely sticking out of your pack.
Yeah. It's Charlie, you don't have to worry about, like, you've ever been to the mines where you see the trucks with the big flag so that they don't get hit by the dump truck? That's Charlie. Charlie's stick is like, where's Charlie? Oh wait, I see him. He's over there.
Exactly.
Put a glove on it and you'll be all set.
Yep.
All right, Gaston.
Yeah, my preference is the carbon 6 carbon fiber mast. It fits inside of the pack. I think it comes in at 17 inches, very lightweight. And when I use it with the Pactenna end fed halfway of the Mini, since it uses 26 gauge wire, I can use the top element. So it puts me up about 19.5 feet with just a little bit of curve at the top. I think the hardest part with that setup is finding a stake out here in the Sonoran Desert, because our ground is so tough. I did crack the bottom section, and thankfully soda beams will allow you to get a replacement so long as you cover the shipping. So I'm on my second bottom base unit, but I love that thing. And about the only change I made to it was wrapping duct tape around the entire unit. And I found that it's keeping it a little bit more secure from cracking at the bottom at the base where the stake system is.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that too, Gaston, because it's so true. Here out in the desert, deploying in the desert, especially when you're in the Phoenix area, when you get up into Flagstaff, it's more like a lot of the rest of the United States. But here it's just it's nothing but rocks sometimes on the top of a peak, and you got to stick that in, did it in rocks, or you got to attach it to like a, I don't know, a cactus or something. It's just really different than a lot of the parts of the United States.
Yeah, one time I took everything out of my backpack and filled it full of rocks, and then tied my mast to the backpack. So that worked well.
All right, you're up, George.
So, well, it's kind of a softball question, because the first answer would be the 10-meter fiberglass mast. But if I'm going to a parking lot or a field, I'd use that. If I'm going to do something on a trail, I'd take the fiber or carbon fiber 10-meter mast. One thing I do want to, well, two things I want to mention. One is the way I finish off the top is I have a little cable clamp I don't know what you call these things. It's a cable clamp. It's got it's a little clip with a hole in through it, and that will pinch around the second to the last element on the carbon fiber mast, or the smallest one on the fiberglass. And then I put a fishing swivel and a clip, the kind that you get at the Cabela's or whatever, and that hangs from that little screw. And so that I can hang anything on that, whether it's got a loop on the end of the wire, the way I do the end feds, or you can loop something through it. So that works out great. And I that's the winner. I've tried, I epoxy this and I did the hook, or that's the winner in my opinion. The other thing is, a lot of times when I set up not on the trail, I'm not someplace where I can stake out guys, either because it takes up room, or I'm in an asphalt parking lot, or you just can't. And so for years I've been using photography tripods. And so the latest setup to complement the carbon fiber mast is I have a carbon fiber tripod. It's a photo tripod. And when it collapses down, it's about a foot long. It's really small.
Oh, wow.
And when the legs extend, they're about 3 feet each. And you only go 2 elements out. You don't go all 4 elements. So it goes out about 2 feet in each direction. And a lot of the tripods now, they used to be a tripod would like come out at a fairly acute angle, but now they have little clips where you can extend it to a lower center of gravity or mass. And so you do that. And so the tripod legs are actually fairly wide. And then you spin off the photo camera ball at the top, put it aside, don't lose it. You won't be using it anymore for the day. And usually what's poking up on the top of the tripod is a 3/8" stud. And so I made a plate that's got 2 holes in it. And so you put the plate with a small hole over the stud and you spin a wing nut on it. And now I've got a collar sitting over to the side. And I take the fiberglass mast or the carbon fiber mast and I stick it up through there. So that holds the top. And then I have a Velcro strap to strap it around towards the bottom. So that holds that. And there's like no mass. I mean, these things weigh nothing. You could pick up the antenna and the mast with your pinky, weighs nothing. And if I'm working out of the car, I have a little nylon gear bag, and I just put 2 5-pound hand weights in it. And on the bottom of the photo tripod, usually there's a hook, and I just hang the gear bag on the hook, suspended, and that keeps the whole thing from falling over, even in a wind, because there's no mass. I mean, the thing is super skinny. There's no weight. And with 10 pounds of pulling down in the middle of it, it's not going to go anywhere. The beauty of that setup is you set it up in like 2 minutes, and you don't have to stake anything out. You could do it on concrete. It's just super duper portable. It's tempting actually to take it on the trail because it is so lightweight. Oh, by the way, it has a built-in photo tripod. So if you also want to do some photography while you're at it, you could just spin the head back on and use it as a photo tripod. So that to me is like the perfect portable antenna setup.
Yeah, cool. So back to the, let's see if I can find this again. Carlos was asking the loop clamp you're talking about for the mask. Do you have it nearby where you could show it or no?
I don't have one right here. Okay. Imagine an oval plate with a big hole and a small hole. I mean, it's no more complicated than that. So it's very simple. And cool. I'm actually going to make a whole bunch of them. So I'll have, if Carlos wants one, I'll be happy to send you one.
Ooh, Carlos, check it out.
Yeah, Carlos. By the way, Carlos is the man. Carlos has the best photos of anybody ever using a HF antenna are from Carlos as he's jumping out of an airplane. It's amazing.
Yep. He has a great YouTube channel. Okay, well, so let's do this. We're 8 minutes over, but I wanted to cover. We still got to do batteries. We can maybe, I don't know. I want to give people an opportunity to ask a few questions, and so why don't we do this? Aside from the batteries, we'll maybe defer batteries for another day. What's your one accessory piece that you would take along with you? We've got the radio, we've got the antenna, mast and antenna, and we've got the battery, which we may defer. What else do you take along? Let's just go around the room. And while we're doing that, you guys in the chat room, if you have a question for George, go ahead and throw them up here and we'll let him answer. And I think we'll round it out with that. We'll get the answers on the accessories, and then we'll answer what questions there are in the chat, and then we'll close out. How's that sound? All right, so let's start with me this time. I would say my accessory is going to be my Morse code paddle. I definitely prefer Morse code over any other mode, and I've been doing a series on different paddles, and I actually have landed on one that I really like, and it is the Bamatech Key TP3. And I have a review coming out on that probably in the next week or so. The Bamatech, if you remember the company, they were the ones that made the enclosure for the CQ, not the CQ Mini, the QCX Mini, but the regular QCX radio. They have this paddle that is, again, it's the TP3, and it is amazing. It's my primary paddle now. Let me just put it that way. So that's for me what I would do. All right, let's go to Brian now.
So yeah, obviously CW key. I bring my I've come my Kenwood D72A because I like having the APRS so I can spot myself if I need to for SOTA. I find that actually pretty useful. So having a radio with me that I can for local stuff has been really helpful. And then a roll up J pole that I use on 2 meters. That's for at least here in Arizona. That sometimes has made the difference with summit to summit contacts and a few other things. So I really like having that with me. And those are, for the most part, that's the only stuff I carry other than the HF gear.
Hey, and Gaston?
Mine has to be the Armor Lock TPA pack frames. I put that on every single radio, and I just like operating the radio with the frames in a vertical position and just sitting over it. So that, along with the right bag, is my go-to accessory.
Okay, and Dan?
Oh, well, outside of lunch, I'd have to say the D72 and the roll-up J-pole. Like Brian said, the radio is just bulletproof. It works all the time. It's got great features, and the roll-up J-pole, I've made a ton of contacts on that thing, and it's simple to use, and it packs right down.
So roll-up J-pole, we're talking 2 meters and 440 antenna, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, and then George.
I was going to say paddle, but you guys said paddle already. A paddle that doesn't give you a lot of vertical wiggle. So a really good paddle's key. But I would say although I've been using resonant antennas mostly, when I do use the random wire antenna, I take a ZM1 or ZM2 antenna tuner. And that's an amazing tuner for QRP ops because it's a manual tuner, so you don't have to worry about having charged batteries or any other complexity. It's a dumb tuner, has a built-in tuning indicator with an LED, and will tune a noodle. So it's got a very good tuning range. They're relatively cheap. You can get them as a kit or assembled, and they'll work fine up to about 15 watts. I think they're rated for 15, maybe 20. That's a great little tuner.
Cool. Yeah, I've actually heard you talk about that before, and I've been looking into it to see if I can get me one because there are some, I want to try the random wire on a couple of radios, and that'd be the way to do it for sure. Well, I think we're about ready to wrap it up. As far as I can tell, there are no questions in the chat room that I could see. So I guess we just talked them to death. I don't know. So we're gonna leave it. We're gonna say 73 to everybody. George, it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show. Really enjoyed it. You have an amazing podcast, and tell all the guys over there on the podcast hello, and that we appreciate them letting you come over here and to be on our side here for a bit. Pactenna, good luck with that. And we'll let the rest of the guys say bye to you, and then we'll say 73, and you guys hang around afterwards, and we'll do some after chat.
73, everyone. George, thanks for the coming on. It was a great show.
Yeah, George, thanks for coming on. 73.
73, George. Thanks for all the good stuff you do.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate you inviting me on. It's been a lot of fun. I'd love to come back sometime. Thanks a lot. 73.